Hello listeners, I'm Sam Buchanan, CEO of the IMAA, and you're listening to the IMAA's podcast series TV101, proudly coming from Acast Studios. TV101 is one chapter in the 8-part media series designed to collectively raise the capabilities of the media industry. In this podcast, we'll hear from 3 media experts who will share their knowledge and experience in the TV industry. Starting off with Kim Portrait, CEO of Think TV, Mark O'Brien, Director of Saint Mob Media, and Emily Kapsis, who is the Media Manager at Hatched Media. Ahead, we're going to discuss planning, strategy with television and measurement, considering all the tips on how to build a successful TV campaign. So listen up and enjoy. First of all, I'd like to welcome our panellists, Kim, Mark and Emily, and let them briefly introduce themselves with a brief introduction and how they started their career.
Thanks, Sam, and thanks for having me on the podcast. My name's Kim Portrait. I started life as a marketer, so went to uni and after that off to Unilever, so FMCG for many years. And then in the time between then and now, have worked in beverages, so beer, insurance, telecommunications, on the client side, and tourism, of course. Have also done, 5-6 year stints at media agencies and creative agencies. So I'm kind of a mongrel dog, really. I've worked in all parts of the sector and find myself now running a business that is fundamentally focused on television in Australia and how it's changing. So that's kind of my story.
Fantastic. Mark?
My story is I started as an accountant and after about 6 weeks realised that wasn't the right career for me, but did the uni and it helped me with attention to detail, which probably does help in the media game. So found the media industry and got into an agency side in Melbourne. Did some trips to Hong Kong and London and certainly ended up in Sydney. A little tired of agency land in the late 90s, jumped over the fence to selling TV, which was a bit of fun, but then went back to agency land and I've been doing that ever since. Started my own shop about 3 years ago.
Amazing. And Emily?
My story is kind of similar. I started my career in HR and I had a good friend who worked in media and said that my personality would be suited to media and to come and have a quick interview with the manager at the time, and I did. And so I started my career off at Initiative probably about 8 years ago now, and then, jumped ship about 5 years later and, now it's hatched and it's been amazing.
Oh, fantastic. I think no one really leaves school and goes, I want to do a fantastic, TV schedule. We've all just found our way into this place. That's a really common theme that we've seen across everyone we speak to, is that they don't leave school wanting to do a fantastic schedule. They just find their way into this industry. Kicking off today's discussion, TV certainly evolved. Kim, can you help the listeners understand how the channel's expanded, how it's evolved in the last couple of years?
It's an interesting word, isn't it, evolved? I actually think that TV's responded. As technology has changed and consumers are able to watch what they want, when they want, how they want, I think what we've seen in the last 5 or 6 years is an explosion of options that the broadcasters are now delivering. So effectively, you can still watch television the same way you used to, if that's what you want. Saturday afternoon with the kids on the couch watching a live sports event. But probably more interesting is the evolution of on-demand and live streamed viewing. So what we now see is if you've got a phone in your pocket, your PC, an internet-connected TV or a tablet, basically you have a television set on you. I think it's really interesting when I see and read the statistics about mobile penetration in Australia, which is massive. While most people look at that in a kind of a binary way, I see it as everyone's got a telly in their pocket. So the best way to answer that question, I suspect, is the broadcasters have moved to meet the way Australians want to consume content and make that content readily available in any place or space that people are interested. So that's probably the best and biggest change. And of course, we'll talk further on in the podcast about more change coming, which I think will help certainly agency owners, broadcasters and marketers as well.
Emily, from your perspectives, when should TV be used in an advertised schedule? What type of business does it work best for?
Look, there's a lot. Like TV to access is expensive. So we know that. So we know that the clients that access TV obviously have to have a budget that's worthy of it being able to be utilised on TV. TV does different jobs, right? So, there's awareness. So if there's a client, again, that's got a new product, awareness, TV is great for awareness. Even if there's product that needs to be sold that, might not be a new product necessarily, but you need frequency, then TV works great for that too. So the client just needs to obviously have the budget, and also we need to be wary of the audience that the client is targeting to, of course. Again, TV is great, but we know that, those younger audiences tend to lean more, into the BVOD or SVOD land versus the older audience. So, we just need to pay attention to the demographic or the audience as well as, what the client, is after in terms of awareness versus frequency.
Mark, when should they use the medium and what does it work best for?
Listen, it works best for instant reach. That's the TV station's number one mantra, and it's certainly true. You want to get that message out and you want to get it to enough people. A week on TV or 2 weeks on TV will actually deliver that strong potential reach. Not all of it, obviously, but certainly well over 50% in that first week or two. And I think that's part of the attraction of TV, that it does have that pulling power still. Obviously, it is becoming a little fragmented. Therefore, when we talk about TV, we talk about the linear side, which is the aerials, but we also talk about what the guys have been talking about, which is the BVOD, which is where the audience are not necessarily dual viewing with linear, but they actually go over there and start watching that all the time. So we need to cover those people to ensure we're getting that reach that TV delivers.
Kim, do you want anything to add to that?
I think we talk about the term total television because it is possible, obviously, to buy linear, as you describe it, like broadcast, but also BVOD. So when you add those things together, I would encourage people to think about total television. And the reason for that is it's the same content. So if I'm watching a program on live at home, it's really unlikely that I'm going to then watch the same thing on BVOD, but my daughter might watch it at that time. And so the other thing to remember with total TV is it takes a bit, it can be fast, but it can also be a slow, long burn as well, depending on the content. Drama, for example, plays that way. So I think the concept of total TV is something that we should start to embrace, given it is now, the way people are buying broadcast.
Kim, how does TV measure itself?
Metropolitan TV is measured by a business called OzTam, and regional television is measured by a business called RegTam. Ostensibly what happens is they recruit Australians, so they recruit Australian households. They put a box in their house and then people watch telly and they log in, whether that's a BVOD, live stream, through the main channels, and they record that data. And because the people they select are representative of the population, they can then add all those people together and get an average. And what they do is they will calculate who watched a program overnight every 7 days, which allows for catch-up television, BVOD, time-shifted viewing, and then every 28 days. So OzTam and RegTam, certainly OzTam's website, publish that data. So if you are looking for the top 20 programs overnight, over 7 days, over 28 days, that's readily available. So that's how that process works. It's labour intensive, but it's really important because the industry, requires really strong and clear measurement.
It's a very expensive process, and certainly the Australian system is probably 5 times as robust as the American system in terms of how many boxes they put into their market for the people meter testing. So we haven't got a biggest audience, but we've got more boxes in the market than even America has. So it's good looking at it that way. I mean, it is a very expensive process that's done all metro and all regional. There's markets like Darwin and Imparja. They haven't done a survey since 2003, and I don't think they're doing one anytime soon either because it's too expensive for them.
I think the VOZ data, when it comes this year, will actually cover off some of those blind spots. Don't quote me. That's a question for the OzTam website, but I'm pretty certain that they're addressing some of those gaps. But I think what we will see is even more robust kind of measurement. So I think it's important that people know and are confident. You're right. It is the largest per capita measurement household panel in the world, I'm pretty sure. And so you can buy with confidence. Mm-hmm. You could go back to your client and say it really did appear, and it appeared in Perth, and it appeared in Adelaide, and it appeared in
That's right.
Cooper Pedy.
And the world's changed now. It used to be filling out a survey book that was sent to these people.
Yes.
Now it's an electronic digital monitoring, checking in. So it should be covered all of Australia wide, which would be fantastic. I mean, a couple of media buyers might be rolling their eyes, but it's good to have good data.
Is TV available everywhere?
TV is available everywhere, but the way you buy it is all about campaign planning. So, for example, there are a number of markets which will be in the deep dive material. Free-to-air markets are different to regional markets, and you sort of choose which one of those based on your client's brief. So if you're an agency based in Brisbane, you've got a local Brisbane client, you're going to want to focus very heavily probably around southeast Queensland, and there are markets that you would purchase there.
Yeah, there's sub-markets of regional markets. So you might pick Toowoomba as a sub-market, Gold Coast as another sub-market, and the sub-market just north of Brisbane, which I think is Maryborough, but don't quote me. And you might take those markets thinking you can get audience that will be relevant for the Brisbane market, but you won't pick Townsville and Cairns, which are two other separate local markets.
And that'll impact, obviously, and reduce the cost. The other thing to remember is subscription television. So Foxtel is bought nationally. So when you buy that, you get a national signal. So it's important to understand where your clients' customers are as part of the planning process.
I've had clients that are desperately wanting to get to AFL and NRL, and it is on the free-to-air, but a lot of it was on the pay TV. Now that the SVOD's come out, which is the streaming KOs, you can buy market by market, postcode by postcode. So it means clubs in New South Wales can enjoy putting spots in rugby league spots on Fox, which is a change in the last 3 years and certainly a great change for all of us.
Good illustration of how it can work, yeah.
Emily, anything to add to that?
I was just going to say, if you're buying, say, metro versus regional TV, but then going even further, let's say your client only wants to be in specific sub-market in terms of regional, then you just need to make your client wary in terms of posts. We're lucky with metro and the regional aggregate markets. So that's Northern New South Wales, Southern New South Wales, Victoria and Queensland Ags. Post data is released weekly, so that's great. Once you start going down further into those sub-markets, you really need to know how often post is released for those specific sub-markets and give your client a heads up in terms of tracking that you might not be able to get them weekly tracking, but it might be fortnightly, or it can go up, could it even be every 4 weeks. So there are sub-markets that you'll need to wait 4 weeks post airtime to run your post for your campaign. So just be wary and let your client know of delays.
Emily, I'm keen to understand what are the considerations when planning and executing a TV campaign.
Okay, you need to obviously have the client brief. Is TV right for this particular client? There's a lot of, background that you get from the brief. What's the target audience? Does the client have any specifics in terms of 30 versus 15 durations? Are they classified a certain way? That means, an alcohol client, for example, they can't be on certain times of the day. There's even things like, does the client have a contract that needs to be kind of adhered to with that agency? Things like CPMs, CPTs, or rates and things that the networks need to adhere to. So, yeah, there's quite a bit of background that you need to kind of know, before you even kind of start the planning stages of TV.
Mark, thoughts?
Yeah, agreed. All that upstream and even downstream, looking at the plan. And we, as media buyers, try to predict the future by using past ratings, which doesn't make any sense at all. So looking at the future, it's a case of looking at every year when you're planning ahead and saying, okay, where are the school holidays? Where are the public holidays? Things like that change people's viewing habits. So therefore, daytime TV on Queen's birthday is a bit stronger than a normal Monday because more people are home. So upstream heavily got involved in that. And then downstream, what are you looking at the intricacies and what can each of the stations deliver to you as well?
Once the campaign is live, how do you monitor it and measure it to make sure it's successful?
The Nielsen company provide post times, which is monitoring TVs and independent post-TV analysis that send them to you. You monitor those spots, what time they appear. You match a rating against that, which is obviously delivered at the same time from Nielsen, to determine what sort of audience you're receiving for the TV buy. That's the measurements. The measurements are really called OzTAM these days, and certainly, as Kim was just saying before, bringing together total TV just means bringing together an understanding of how many people are watching TV in total, as opposed to the 2 or 3 different segments of it that we've been talking about.
Kim, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember, you're right, Mark, when you're buying TV, you're planning against past ratings. TV is not a set and forget medium. Once you've decided that your client's brief and campaign objectives will be met by broadcast and you go through the process of putting a schedule down, it's really important to keep an eye on things on a weekly basis just to make sure that the spots, if you're buying spots, that's a spot is just a 30-second placement inside a program, that those spots are being delivered. And if there are any issues on audiences or the spot didn't appear or the spot appeared too much, I think those things from a weekly point of view are really important. So I would actively encourage people to do a weekly tracking report to make sure that they're optimizing their buy as it goes along, particularly if you are trading directly with the network and not programmatically. Programmatic's a bit different. I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But make sure that you actually are keeping an eye on what is forecast, what's being delivered, and making sure that you meet your clients' requirements, I think is also a really important part of the monitoring process.
You really have to do it weekly, be on top of it and understand the trends of programs aren't working as well as you thought they would. They're not as hot as last year, or something else has come up on another station that's starting to drag the audience away from that audience you expected to get.
Yeah, it's not stationary. It's
No.
because people are watching programs, which means you're responding to consumer behaviour.
Exactly.
Almost in real time, at least on a weekly basis. You can actually do it on an overnight basis, I suppose, but it's better to do it on a weekly basis to get a full picture.
And going on Kim's point, which is a bit sad for me, but the fact that we use something called holdings these days, which is an electronic matching of spots from the network with what's in my system, means that I'm not sitting down for 3 hours checking off confirmations, paper and ticking boxes. And it's just a very time-consuming component of getting the attention to detail right. With this that's come in holdings in the last 10 years, it's just been magnificent in terms of the administration of making sure you're monitoring those thousands of spots.
Yeah.
Are they still there? Are they still in their system? Are they going to appear?
Yeah, the simplification of some of the, I suppose, not glamorous. My husband calls it the new water heater. You know, you need it it makes life better, but you don't necessarily want to get into the weeds on how it works. I think holdings has been a great innovation to give agency staff, agency principals back time to do what they really want to do, which is to make sure that the campaign goals and objectives are being met for clients. So that certainly has been a really useful thing.
Emily, when buying a TV campaign, how does the process start? Like, where do you start with it all?
There's this great tool called eCam. So you've got all your budget, your client parameters there, what buying demographic you're going to use. You jump into eCam and you look at the timing. So we're talking about kind of past timing, so same time last year or whatever campaign timing you kind of are planning for your client. You'll look at how did it perform, how did the network perform, what's the network shared for that particular demographic. You can run peak off peak and like main and digi splits as well and have a look at all of that, and that will help you guide what networks you might be leaning towards in terms of buying your actual TV. And once you've got all that information handy, you also then need to use another tool to run CPTs for your client. You need to have CPTs. Basically, it's a cost per TARP, and it's how much your campaign is going to cost you depending on the month that you're looking at to plan your campaign. And then once you've got all this, I could talk about this for ages, but like there's reach curves as well that you can have. So this is where you kind of look at the point of diminishing return based on your budget and the client's demographic. You might say have X amount of budget. You might get to a point where you're spending too much money for not a lot in return in terms of reach. So at what point do you kind of cut off and say, you know what, it's better off us investing this elsewhere as opposed to on TV. So there's all that stuff that you have, kind of all your planning ahead. And then once you've got all that, you can basically go ahead and start your either buying your TV or you brief your TV. So you can buy off screen or you can brief your TV. So there's a lot that goes into it.
I was just going to add exactly that one of the things that agencies should think about, or TV buyers, video buyers actually, is how you're going to buy. So whether it's buying on screen, which will mean that you're going to physically choose the spots through software, or briefing networks, certainly those two are very common, but increasingly we're seeing programmatic trading of television where it's a much more automated process. Depending on your campaign objectives, depending on if you're looking for high velocity reach, impressions against younger audiences, you can do that in an automated way. And also I would say addressable television, which is offered by many of the broadcasters, where if you're looking for high velocity or instant reach, which I think this is the term you used, which is a great term, you can also supplement that with BVOD in terms of addressable and targeting, which brings the price down. And certainly makes it more attractive for clients that have got very specific target audiences and very specific objectives. So I think about how you're going to buy, because that will ultimately influence the amount of time that you've got to spend as a buyer setting up a campaign as well as monitoring.
And just to piggyback off that, I would say also lead times are really important as well. So, the lead time that you get from your client, which recently, I would say, lead times have shortened a lot. So, when you've got short lead times, maybe it's obviously quicker to brief or buy dynamically your TV as opposed to buying it off screen. When you buy off screen, you obviously need a lot more time to be able to get the buy right when you buy off screen. So yeah, lead times are super important also.
Yeah, I mean, ideally a 12-week lead time if you want really good quality programming is ideal. That can, contract depending on market conditions, but it is important to know that great spots, it's a bit like an aeroplane. The good spots, that are well priced, up the pointy end tend to go first. And then if you're flying last minute, you will end up paying more for that premium economy seat or that economy seat down the back of the bus. So if you think about television like an aircraft and like traveling, that's probably a pretty easy way to understand how lead times work.
And the other problem I see on that is 12 weeks out, just knowing what the programming's going to be. So where is that aeroplane actually taking you?
100%. But I mean, I think it's fair to say that that networks are going to put on high quality content during peak. Daytime schedules don't actually change that much. So if you're a daytime buyer, you sort of know largely what the block schedule, the block plan's going to be. I appreciate that there's some nuance around, hit shows and tentpole shows, but the truth of it is probably 80% of it is pretty
set,
consistent.
It is set. Yeah. I mean, it's really just news. Then the tentpole comes in for a repeat at 12 to 1 or 2, and then you go into the afternoon.
So there is a good deal of predictability and certainty. The networks are not going to put a program on at 7 o'clock that they know is not going to work.
Yeah.
If you're buying a spot or sponsoring a program or doing opening billboards, you can be pretty certain between 6 and 9 it's going to be a high velocity audience. And certainly daytime, which many, many clients take advantage of, is pretty set. I mean, the specifics of the content, but there's going to be morning shows, there's going to be the programming you'll hold.
Mark, what's the step-by-step process for you for booking a campaign just in a bullet point format, from picking up the phone to your rep to getting the post-analysis report?
For me, my clients are a little bit different. I mean, 10 years ago, I was buying very much dynamically, programmatically, and I had direct response clients that want lots of airtime, really cheap cost per thousands, and get to people lots of times. My clients are not like that anymore. They're more branding type of clients. So for me, it's about getting a decent price, which means negotiating a discount, which means discussing with the stations what your commitment is to the market, TV market, and what percentage of it they're going to get. So they're obviously very caring about that. There's the ways you can go about the buy. I tend to buy myself, and I'll tend to actually just buy a base, which will be things like some news, some breakfast TV, and a couple of spots or 3 spots in 7:30, 8:30, Sunday to Wednesday. Just knowing, as Kim said, they are the spots that generally work. Sometimes I get told off, but I call 8:30 the Netflix hour, which is where everybody flicks off and starts watching Netflix. And we can't put ads on that we can soon. So there's some things about how you strategically target your audience. Once I like to get that down base, because that I tend to not be 12 weeks out. I might be 6 weeks out, and I won't get all that. So then I have to sit back and look at the buy and okay, where's the problem? It's always Sydney, because that's where the market's in the highest demand and the lowest probably viewing, because people have got better things to do in Sydney. So you'll look at that and say, all right, where does Sydney need to be fixed? What can I do to tap that up? And then that's how you bring the buy together for me, but everybody does it differently. I just like to just do it piece by piece and make sure it's in the right place. And then obviously you're running it, you're monitoring it, you're tracking it every week. So as Kim was saying, you're looking at holdings, making sure your spots are appearing still. If they're falling out, you get onto the station and say, can you get that spot back in? It might be out because someone sponsored that program you're in and you can't get into it anymore. So you have to find another spot short term. And then it's a case of monitoring it. And it's best to track that. Not only track it in the future, but track the actual results week by week so you can get right onto any issues.
It's a 10-step process for an agency. Once you've got the authority to buy, all the way through to post-analysis.
And you'll find all of this stuff in your complimentary handbook. Emily, what are the 2 key things that you need to consider when planning a client's TV campaign?
So your reach is super, super important, and your frequency is super important. So when you're planning out a TV campaign, you can plan till 1+, 2+, 3+, 4+, like it can go on, but the main ones are 1+ and 3+ reach. And this is basically the bread and butter of TV. So we talk about TARPs, and TARPs are target audience rating points. It's a percentage of the target audience that we're reaching in terms of our specific programs that we buy. But it's your reach really that determines, I guess, the success of your campaign. So especially when you're post-tracking weekly to your campaign, you really need to be pulling those spots out of post weekly when they're released, and then, loading them into ETAM and really looking at how your TV buy is going when it comes to your reach goals. Your reach goals you would have obtained back in the planning phase. So when we were talking about, when you first look at ETAM and you plan out your campaign, you would have set out reach goals for your campaign, and also the point of diminishing returns. So your reach curves as well will help determine your reach goals. So yeah, it's super, super important pulling your post weekly, loading it into ETAM. Where am I in terms of hitting my reach goals? Does it look likely that I'm going to hit my reach goals? If not, how can I optimize my campaign? What do I need to change around? Or do I have extra budget that I've maybe left aside to inject and buy 1, 2, 3 more peak spots? Because, hitting your reach goals is probably what is the most important when you're reporting back to your client post-campaign.
When planning and strategizing your schedule, is there a special sauce? Like, is there a favorite go-to format that you know is always going to work? But you were talking before about Thursday to Wednesday to Thursdays or Fridays. I'll start with you. Is there a special sauce? What do you like? Is there a certain format that you like best?
It just changes every client. It really does. And there's no pull out file B, it'll work for this client and that client. I wish it would.
That's disappointing.
But my clients vary from a client like Makita, which is targeting young tradie blokes. Another client, Clubs New South Wales, probably targeting the older end. So certainly you'd have two different strategies in terms of reaching those sort of audiences. That's probably the key difference. The other difference is then I go into what is that target audience viewing consumption habits? For example, going back to the Makita, they're less likely to watch a lot of TV, but they're likely to watch a bit of 7-8 and things like that can be more cost efficient to touch our audience and get some more frequency. So there's different ways of targeting for different audiences and different clients really, and it's piece by piece, put it together.
Emily, do you have a secret sauce for planning?
Look, ETAM is your best friend when you're a TV planner. That tool really, you can look at week-on-week comparisons. If you're looking to buy into a launch of a program, or that's where it can get a bit harder, especially if it's a brand new launch. There's a few coming out shortly. But if you're buying into something like, for example, MasterChef, you can look at year-on-year on MasterChef. ETAM is a really good tool to use when you're buying into those peak programs, and it gives you that, ammo when you're discussing with the network in terms of discount or in terms of, if you're looking at a sponsorship as well, you can have a look at year-on-year ratings for that particular program and, really have that on hand when you're negotiating.
I'd also like to add creativity. I think television is one of the media channels where it's problem solving, it's creativity, it's thinking about things differently. Unlike potentially some other channels, which is set and forget. You set a rate, you set a date, and that's kind of the end of it. Television really is an opportunity to think broadly and laterally. People that work really well in media agencies who buy great campaigns typically are really innovative lateral thinkers because they're always trying to solve a problem, which I actually think makes the process a lot of fun.
I think as a medium, it's the most creative medium. You look at the Super Bowl commercials and what they do there, and, it's a talking point. Emily, whilst you're talking about those kinds of tips, are there any tips for planning and for people starting out in the industry that you want to share?
Yeah, I would say definitely set good relationships with your rep. Your rep can be your best friend at times. It's good to have good relationships because you might come into a bit of trouble and you need to help your rep to help you out. But it's also, staying on top of what are those programs that are coming up. They might think of you and your client first when it comes to accessing key programming or, even bonus airtime that might be available. Good relationships with your reps, I would say, would be number one. The other one would be don't beat yourself up. If a mistake happens, it happens to the best of us. So, I think honesty is the best policy. So just be up and honest, talk to your manager about it, and, there'll be a way to fix it for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a great advice and a great tip. I think that's at the end of the day, we're not in media, we're not saving lives, and sometimes we take ourselves a little bit too seriously, and everyone understands that problems happen. Mark, tell us any tips that you have.
I think attention to detail has to be there because the more mistakes that you make, the more time you're wasting and going back fixing those mistakes, because the mistakes that you make in media will always come back to haunt you. But saying that, what Emily said is absolutely right. You've got to come clean with it. My saying was, I can't fix a spot that went to air last night, but I can fix a spot that goes to air tonight. So the sooner you can admit to your mistake, the sooner it can be fixed. And even that spot that went to air last night, the rep, if you're in good books with them, can work that out for you. So there's ways to fix things. And as Emily said, get on with your reps, but actually when they invite you out, go out with them. That's the key. Go and have a chat to them off premise because that's where you form those relationships.
Couple of other ideas from a client point of view, make sure that before you start, the client understands what it is you're doing. So a weekly or a campaign buy summary, I think, is really important. Sets expectations so that everybody understands kind of what they think they need. Holdings are your best friend. when you're buying, given, the amount of time and effort that goes in. So keep, to your point, Mark, keep an eye on holdings on a weekly basis. And then probably a different sort of lens on this is make sure you record the results, outcomes, delivery of all previous campaigns in a particular client's file. So campaign learnings are so valuable. And I agree that it does certainly change, what you buy from week to month to year. But certainly if your client has a campaign Bible where you can help them to understand, and particularly with the movement of marketers, so much movement and bouncing around, having the agency as the central home of knowledge about how things work and what's worked in the past can be really, really helpful. So I would suggest campaign learnings, institutionalizing those is really quite useful as well.
Oh, 100%.
You'd be surprised how many times the client asks for you for information that they might have even given you in the first place, but you've got it, where it is, and you need to give it back to them.
Organisation.
Campaign learning should really be part of the planning process back when you first start. It's like, okay, cool. What was our last campaign? Did we have TV? How did it perform? What network were we on? So, yes, definitely campaign learning is, definitely important. A good tip.
And this is open for everyone. There's a plethora of tools out there that you can use. What is your favourite or your go-to tool for you? I'll start with you, Mark.
My favourite tool is gut feel, really. It is, I'll look at ratings in the past, but I know programs move around. I know last year with 7 there was, movement around of The Voice and it finished early and Big Brother came in. So as Emily said before, you've got to be on top of what's going on in the future. And really you can only ask for assurance on what's happening in the next quarter. And that's probably where they're really going, that's definitely going to happen, which means you've got foresight for that sort of period.
How do you stay up to date with what's going on and all these things?
These days it's via email. It's via your news sources are either your Media Weeks or your umbrellas or your Made Media, or there's the station EDMs that come through, and they're very good at saying, right, this is coming on this time. So you've got to keep it all in mind. You've certainly got to keep a track of it. And then you go back to it when you're doing the planning and the timing to see, okay, which program's where. Let's just make sure, get another program format from the station that's recent and start doing your buy from there. Gives you the confidence.
Emily, what's your favourite tool and what do you go to?
I think I've mentioned it 2 times already. ETAM, again, is great. It's got everything that you need from planning to post-campaign. So ETAM is a great one. We have a tool called Curvature. That's what we use to run reach curves. Again, that is a great tool and a tool that is super, super important for us when it comes to planning against reach goals. We can't live without Nielsen and OzTAM and the ratings that come through Spectra. We need the holdings tool and the system that it lives in to be able to monitor our campaigns. So they're all my favourite tools, let's be honest.
Kim, do you have any other? There's a whole heap there that you could use.
There is. I think rather than name specifics, I think the idea that you have something that enables you to understand programming versus prior period, whatever that is, whether that's ETAM or something else, I think. So understanding programming is really important. I think understanding reach frequency, as Emily and Mark both said, also really important. And there's about 26 different kinds of ways that agencies do that. And it doesn't really matter what the brand of tool is as long as that's the piece of work. And then, of course, OzTAM measurement, what happened for the money that you invested. So I would say measurement, I would say reach and frequency, and I would say a planning tool of some kind, irrespective of how big or small your client or your agency is a really important part of the process.
Now we're going to move to the future. And I'll probably start with Emily, you. What does the future of TV look like for you?
I think it's just going to get more and more about screen planning or video planning, like you spoke about earlier. TV is number one if you want high reach quickly TV, but audiences are becoming fragmented, and so having a screen approach is going to get more and more important, and it's looking at how to split up or divvy your budget to what particular screen. So I think as we head into the rest of this year, a screen's approach is going to be a big thing for TV,
Yeah, the screen approach, and certainly the ability, just even at the top end of the ability to target better with that screen approach means that you can not just chase the TV demographics, but you can get better geographic targets. You can get into postcodes. You can get into much smaller demographics. So the ability to find your audience in that screen area is certainly a lot easier than it is. And my feeling of the future is, I could be right, I could be wrong. It's probably 80-20, 70-30 in terms of linear viewing versus BVOD viewing. But that BVOD viewing 2 years ago was 10%. So it is maybe 20, 25% now, but it's going to keep growing. And aerials fall off roofs due to, time. And the replacement is a quick and easy, let's just plug in and do it by digital. So therefore, I can see the audience as being 50-50, certainly in the next 10 years, in terms of that total TV won't necessarily die, but the split of it will become much more even in the future.
Kim, you would have a fascinating view of what's happening around the world.
Well, I think Emily and Mark have kind of nailed it in terms of where it's headed. Screen strategy, definitely. As you rightly identify, people are watching on different devices. One of the key things I see is that the media agencies will start to make use of what's already available. So Virtual Australia, which is the database from Oztam, measures cross-screen. That data will be available this year. So if you're planning cross screens, to Emily's point, you'll be able to monitor and track a spot irrespective of what piece of content it appeared in, irrespective of what screen or device it appeared on, and irrespective of when it was watched. So I think that's a big piece, in the industry embracing that's really important.
And I think too, you'd be able to add that to your reach goals.
Correct.
To have an overall reach, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Like to be able to join BVOD and traditional TV and have an overall one reach goal, hit the reach goal, is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, media industry has said, we need to be able to measure across screen, and Oztam, on behalf of the broadcasters, is responding to that. So the future would be using that. The second part, I think, is TV is existing in two places. So you can geo-target now. So I get the Bonnie Rig Golf Club ads, not that I'm a golfer. So that happens right now today. So if you've got a client that needs to get into a specific target, you already know that there are millions and millions of signed-in users for all of the broadcasters through their BVOD services. And I think the tipping point came a couple of years ago. Today we have more than, I think it's 66% of homes have an internet television, as we would call it, over the top of their tablets, their phones, their PCs. So we've reached a tipping point where Australians can actually enjoy any kind of content through the living room, which we know is the preferred space. So I think that targetability is real. And then I think addressability and programmatic buying is also becoming increasingly important as the way people change the way they watch. And what we're seeing, I think in the last 6 months, about 53% of what was viewed through BVOD was on demand. But what's really interesting about that is the remaining 40+% was viewed live.
Yeah, and it used to be a lot less than that.
It absolutely did. It's grown like crazy. So people are watching TV through the app on their connected TV, but they're watching live news.
Yeah, and it could be a reason that they don't pick up Channel 7. They've got a great signal on 9 and 10, but the mountain's in the way, so they'll have to watch 7+.
Great point. So so the future is about measurability of cross-screen. It's about all the things that used to make it great, high velocity reach. But I think there's coming this industry embracing the more, I suppose, digital aspects of broadcast through addressability, through targeting. So it's a pretty interesting kind of space at the moment.
And changing very fast.
Yes.
Yeah. Kim, what do you see in the ways of trends for programmatic and forecasting the future of that?
Well, I think part of that question is answered best by how agencies are structured. So there's certainly an increase in programmatic buying. There's no question about that. But if an agency is going to adopt an all-screen strategy, then it kind of needs to organise itself that way. So what we're seeing as a trend is agencies formulating around this idea of a screen strategy, which means that some of it is bought on screen, some of it is bought direct, some of it is bought programmatically. So I suspect that gone are the days where you had the trading desk or the digital team sitting over in the corner and then the TV buyer sitting over somewhere else, and then, obviously other screens kind of involved. So I think the industry is going to evolve, because it has to. You can't continue to buy parallel swim lanes if it's the same content. Otherwise, there are challenges with reach and frequency, which I think will be able to be measured. But ultimately, that would be a key one for us.
And I think automation, if not programmatic, but automation, if you're not playing in that space, agencies should definitely be doubling down on whatever they can do, automate it.
I was going to say that in the next 5 years, Kim might know more, but there could be a walled garden in the BVOD space, which means the only way you can get in there is probably via programmatic, via the stations direct, as opposed to coming in from the outside. But they're things that will keep changing in this industry and we'll have to keep up.
The beauty of programming is that if you are a sponsor of a big tentpole and you also want the digital rights, so it's as different as the day is long.
Yeah.
Yeah, opportunities abound. It's a question of what commercial arrangement the client and the agency want with the broadcaster and the program.
Emily, do you have anything to add to that?
I think the guys are pretty spot on. The traditional TV in terms of viewership is diminishing, so we know that. So the eyeballs towards BVOD is increasing. Is it increasing as fast as what linear TV is decreasing? That's the question that I have. I don't think that it is. So, I think us as agencies have to be mindful of our audience and, linear versus BVOD and how much we're putting into each and, just making sure that it's right for our clients.
I want to ask everyone their best career tips for the people starting out in the industry. Emily, I'll start with you. Career tips. What's the best advice you've ever been given?
Best advice, I would say ask those questions, find a mentor or a leader that you kind of can relate to and just set time with that person and just ask all the questions. No question should be an embarrassing question. That's probably one tip. And the other one is, honesty for me is the best policy. I think when it comes to your clients or your reps, I think if you're just yourself, so again, go back to, if you've made a mistake, just be honest about it. How can we fix it? Those are probably the two main tips is ask questions and everyone makes mistakes. So be honest, upfront and honest and just be yourself and you'll find a solution.
Amazing. Mark?
Yeah, agreed with Emily. It's not really for the starters. 5 years, I'd say put your head down and all of a sudden you'll look up and you'll have a senior position. As a famous legend in the media industry in Melbourne once said to me, he says, look after your clients, the media will always be there. And what he meant by that is that when you start dealing with clients, you really develop a relationship with them and you're helping them, but they'll move on. Everybody moves on, but you'll find they'll move on to another place and ring you back up and say, can you work with me again? So the media teams will always change, but you're always dealing with 9, 7 or 10, but the client can move into another role and can be beneficial to you for future business. And you develop those close relationships. I've had clients that have come back after 6 years where I hadn't heard from them for 6 years. And he said, rings me up and said, we're getting the band back together. I said, what do you mean? But that's just, the relationships you had and the work you did with them in that past, they really appreciate it. And they want to just come back to you and work with you again.
Good advice. Kim?
I feel like the soft one, I'm going to say follow your passion. Bring it to work. Do what you love. Find and be curious about all the new things and even some of the old ones in terms of the work that you do because it's a terrific industry. Great people, relationships and personalities. I don't think there's a richer fabric in the country than the media industry, but I think you've got to be a willing participant. So if you're enjoying it, double down and make sure you bring that passion to work.
Fantastic. A massive thank you to our TV experts today, Kim Portrait from Think TV, Mark O'Brien from St. Mom Media, and Emily Kapsis from Hatch. Thank you for joining us.